Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the boisterous Charles Coulombe.
Happy days are here again. The sky.
Yay! Yeah.
It's the first day. It's the first day of spring break here in Trumau. 2 fabulous weeks off. What?
That's fine. You living it up?
I am living it up. 2 weeks. I'm not going to Fort Lauderdale for spring break. No. I'm not going to the Riviera or Malta. No, I'm not going to any of those places. Where am I going for spring break? Which is actually Easter break, being Holy Week and Easter week. I'll tell you, I'm going to be seeing sites associated with Emperor Karl and Blessed Emperor Karl and his Empress. So on Monday, I'm going to go to Schloss Eckartsau, which was their last residence before they were driven out of the country in 1919. And I will go to, on the Wednesday after Easter, I'm going to go to Schloss Artstetten, which was the castle of, he and his wife were assassinated at Sarajevo, causing the Great War and the end of the empire and the end of everything sane and good and beautiful and true. But they are interred at that castle, which is still owned by their descendants, the Hohenbergs, who were kind enough to invite me. So, and I'll be seeing some other places. I hope to see the chapel where they were married, but the castle that's in is now a women's prison, so it's a little tough getting access.
You cut out in the beginning. I assume you're talking about Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah, Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke and his wife who were murdered at Sarajevo.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to all of that and getting some writing done.
Yeah, you got the in with the Habsburgs, right? That whole thing.
Yes. I mean, I won't say that we're buds, and of course there are many Habsburgs here. The Archduke Karl is the head of the clan, the rightful emperor and king of Hungary and Bohemia and so on. And he's gotten very active in a lot of really good things. His brother Georg is living in Hungary, but there's a specifically Hungarian branch of the Habsburgs that are also back in Hungary now. And their head, Archduke Michael, is the head of the move to beatify Cardinal Mindszenty.
Oh.
That drive is going really great guns right now. It looks like something's happening there. So the Habsburg clan are very much engaged in all sorts of great and glorious things. And I can't help but think what a better place this part of the world would be if they were playing their old role, which, please God, they will one day again. Of course, I'd say the same for the Bourbons in France and the Braganzas in Portugal and so on. The Romanovs in Russia, even. But, yeah, so it's what my spring break is going to be, and I am looking forward to it.
Oh, so you're just worried about the welfare of Europe now. You don't care about America. You don't care about what's going on here. You could care less.
No, that's not true. I could care less. I don't care less. I could care. I don't. I could. No, I'm very much concerned. I'm deeply concerned about our new governor in California, Governor Newsom. Governor Brown can rest easy in that his title of worst governor ever is soon to be lost, apparently.
Was it? I mean, we've had so many bad governors. Everyone forgets Gray Davis. Everyone forget. Isn't that funny?
The name.
Isn't that funny though? Like he was like one of the worst, and now, but we've had so many bad ones. It's like he's a distant memory, and no one even remembers this guy.
We had Arnold.
Yeah.
And Arnold got rid of him. Arnold was from here, from Austria. Austria's gift to California. He pumped us up. And then, of course, we had the undead governor, the man from the grave, the Walking Dead, Governor Brown.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the governor from The Walking Dead.
No, same thing. And you never saw Governor Brown with his club, Lucille?
Nope.
No,
Never
well,
did. Wow.
you don't want me to go down that rabbit hole, do you?
No.
I mean, imagine Governor Brown with his chrome dome clutching this mailed baseball bat.
Surrounded with in barbed wire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
yeah. We got to get us some legislation passed. So, and now you've got Governor Gruesome Newsom. So,
Wow, gruesome Newsom. I like that.
Gruesome Newsom. So he really was a piece of work as mayor of San Francisco, and I'm sure he'll be an even bigger piece of more work now.
Well, that's part of the job, right? It's like, well, mayor of San
Oh, yeah.
Francisco, you know. So,
He, really, really sad creature. And the Trumpster seems to be holding his own as Presidente. The 2 years of investigation have come to an end. There's a meme I like that shows this old guy looking disgruntled in a T-shirt. The T-shirt says, "I investigated President Trump for 2 years, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt."
cute. I like that. I didn't see that
That
one. That's
that was
good.
fun.
Yeah.
That was fun. Of course, now everybody's gearing up for election 2020. It's just become typical now of our presidents. They're really only 2 years on the job. The first 2 years.
You're right.
Then the second 2 years. Oh, Merry Christmas, by the way. I just noticed that. Merry Christmas.
Great. Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad you could bring all of the feasts of our Lord together. You got a little bit of Corpus Christi action going on. Well, you got the Sacred Heart behind you, so that's good. Of course, so do I. So anyway. But no, it's good that you're bringing it all together. It's
Okay.
only 230 more shopping days till Christmas or whatever it is. I hope you're going to announce a pre-Christmas special. Anyway, so let me see what else we got. Yeah, so the United States is, I would say that the difference in the situation in Europe and the situation in America right now. I mean, in Britain is dealing with Brexit and the fact that the government there straight the Brexit process apparently, and the EU, of course, itself, the machinery, is very much in the hands of the generation of '68. So it's interesting that we'll talk about that later, I guess. But Pope Benedict took kind of a swipe at the current leadership of Europe. Of the European Union,
Right.
in his thing, which was fun. But all of it taken together, the difference in the situations here and in America is that in Europe, the situation is serious, but not hopeless. In America, it's hopeless, but not serious. So we're all right.
That is so unbelievably unpatriotic, Charles.
What's unpatriotic?
You don't take us seriously, and there's no hope. Wow.
We do take ourselves seriously. We take ourselves very seriously. We're the last best hope of all mankind, the shining city on the hill, the last stand of the American dream, the empire of the 21st century, all that stuff.
You don't seem impressed.
Well, let's put it this way. I've been in every one of the 50 states of our great and glorious union, and I've loved them all. I love the United States above any other country in the world. It's true. But having said that, every country has her set of pretensions and nonsense. And
What's France's?
the whole idea of the French Revolution, the Republic wanted indivisible, the laicité, that is the lay state, and all this crap.
What about Austria?
Same. Karl Renner and the socialists.
Okay.
Karl Renner, not to be confused with Karl Rahner, was the architect of the modern Austrian state. He was a guy who's still considered a people here. He betrayed his country 3 times, attempted to collaborate with the Nazis, but they wouldn't take him. Now think about that. They wouldn't. He offered himself, but they wouldn't take him. No, they didn't throw him in a camp either. They in his house all through their time here. He wasn't worth their bothering.
Wow.
And then when the Soviets came, he offered himself to them for the third and ended up as president. And this is a man who's considered a hero. So trust me, every country has its own sort of nonsense that it goes on.
Okay.
But I grew up with ours. And you got to bear in mind, too, that we have a situation, and there are similar in other countries, I'm sure, but again, because I'm an American, they hit me more when we do it than when other people do their stuff. But the idea, for instance, of the same Supreme Court that gave us abortion and gay marriage trooping off to the Red Mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington every year. I don't know, that just really burns my bacon the wrong way, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But as far as patriotism goes, I defy anyone to top my love of the United States. I'll put this one last way. Imagine you've met someone in your family, say. All his life he's been a big eater. And the guy's huge. He's 370 pounds. He's morbidly obese. He can't get out of bed. Now, which is kinder? To say, sure, I'll get you another pair of Twinkies. You're fine. You're not getting any weight. Or to say, you know, pal, I think you probably had enough Twinkies. Who's actually being kind? Who's really showing him love?
The enabler.
The enabler. Good answer. All right, I stand corrected. You know what? There's so many people who love my country far more than I do. Our national neurosis has so many enablers, I don't know where to begin. So, yeah, you're right. What was I thinking? I'm a traitor to my country. Let me be shot now. Oh. Anyway, as one who was raised on American Heritage Magazine and National Geographic and Boy's Life and an Eagle Scout. Did I mention I'm an Eagle Scout? The Knight of Columbus?
What is
Fourth
this?
degree.
Is this like your American patriotic resume? Is this what you're doing?
Yeah, this is what I'm doing here. I love Irving Berlin and Norman Rockwell. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Who are those guys?
Well, if you don't know, I'm not telling.
Oh, okay.
And my dad was in the American Legion, so there.
There you go.
All right.
All right.
So anyway, so there we go. That's the monologue for this evening. What else we got?
Okay. So before we kind of get revved up here, I want to do just a shout out. One of our fans showed this to me, and I felt it needed a shout out. FreeBrownScapular.com. You'll never guess what they do at FreeBrownScapular.com.
String rosaries.
Close, so close, but so far.
Oh no, I've got this. Distribute miraculous medals.
Oh, even closer, warmer. You can.
I can do this.
You can do this.
Blessed Pope Francis spoons.
No.
Oh.
Who wants a blessed Pope Francis spoon?
Blessed Pope Francis spoon collectors. Well, who else would want them? If you don't collect spoons, you're not going to want spoons, will you? So presumably, if you wanted a Pope Francis blessed spoon, you would be a Pope Francis blessed spoon collector.
It's
called inductive reasoning.
Yes.
I've come to school to learn.
Anyhow, at freebrownscapular.com, you get free brown scapulars. Isn't that incredible? They give them away.
I would take advantage of that, and that's not a joke. By all means, ladies and gentlemen, do not hesitate. And I don't know how they do it.
I don't either. And they have deals too, where even if you already have your own brown scapular, you could get 50 brown scapulars for $1 a piece. 50 brown scapulars for $50, and distribute them. I think that's amazing. I'm tempted to do that myself, but so I just give a shout out. Scapulars are so important. Scapular is one of the underrated things of our great religion that not enough people are doing.
And they're particularly important now. You know, really, ladies and gentlemen, the rosary, the scapular, the miraculous medal, the various confraternities, the Sacred Heart, all of these sorts of the St. Benedict medal,
Yeah.
the fivefold scapular, all of these things are things we can do to make our tiny corner of the world, i.e. ourselves,
Yeah.
better and closer to God. And we should. You know, you may not like your leadership in church and state, but you know what? This isn't about them. This is about you and God and Our Lady and the saints and the angels. So, yeah, brownscapular.com. Give them a whirl.
Yeah. Okay, on to the memes and dreams segment. Someone, I'll bring this up on the screen now. I've showed Charles this before. You won't be able to see now, but he'll see it here. This is from a gentleman on Twitter who made this. It says, meanwhile at Tumblr House, Vincent engages constructively with the workforce. And so, for those of you who are listening to us through audio, what you have here, see on the on the left side, you have a manager, and the manager in his hand, he's got this motivational tool. And then
is that what they're calling it now? You mean like your Christmas bonus?
Something like, yeah, it motivates people. And then on the right side, you have his workforce, his employees getting stuff done, you see? And so, yeah, what do you think of this, Charles? Do you have any comments on this?
Oh, I'll say I have comments on that. I mean, you've been running Tumblr House like that, and your brother before you since I don't know the sky was built.
You're against getting stuff done. You just want everyone to sit around. Is that what you?
Pretty much. I'm a writer. What do you think? But I think, frankly, that the root of the problem of Tumblr House lies squarely with the commissary. If you fed your people decently, you wouldn't need to whip them into shape, now would you?
Well, I mean, I think feeding is overrated, isn't it? I mean, look, here's the thing, Charles. Okay, without this type of setup, we wouldn't have many of the great wonders of the world. I mean, the pyramids at Giza, the Great Wall of China. Do you think they really fed their people adequately?
They had to have fed them something, or they wouldn't have built them at all.
Well, there you go. Maybe they did. Maybe they did tilapia. Maybe they did.
Actually, thinking back to what the commissary is like, I can well imagine that your cooks worked for the Great Wall of China and the Great Pyramid. I begin to understand now. It begins to make sense. I never forget when your brother first hired me, and he said, "Oh, and by the way, there's free lunch." And my brother said to me, "Yeah, well, there's no such thing as a free lunch." Boy, was he right. Bad.
Well, again, it's penitential, Charles. Okay, we're looking out for people's spiritual well-being. I'm sorry you're so resistant to having any sort of spiritual life.
Oh, thanks. It's not always Lent, Somebody in the culinary department there at Tumblr House never got that memo. It's not always Lent.
I get it. So when it's not Lent, you have meat on Fridays. Is that what you do? Is that what you do? Oh, it's not Lent. I can have meat on Fridays, right? Is that what you're saying? That's okay, Charles. We're not going to judge you.
You're not going to super chat me like this.
I'm just trying to understand you, Charles.
What are you guys serving on Easter week? What is that? Yeah. What's the menu on the commissary on Easter week? Yeah, same. Tilapia on Monday, mackerel on Friday. Yeah. You watch it slowly age. And let me tell you something, just for your sake, the sake of the studio audience, mackerel is not slightly greenish in color. It's dark brown. Okay?
Yeah.
And that little greenish fuzz, all right, fish don't have fur. It's mold.
Look, Charles. Okay, I'm not going to apologize for running a tight ship on Tumbler House, okay? I'm very proud to say we run a tight ship, okay? I'm not over here trying to do, Yang bucks or something, with everyone just trying to leech off the system and just trying to scoop up as much as they can get, okay? All these young whippersnappers, just so easily lured by free money, okay? Back in my day, we had to work for a living, am I right, Charles?
Inherited everything.
What? Say that again?
You inherited everything. You inherited the company.
No, I made my bones in the mailroom, Charles. How dare you?
Yeah, I know. The hardest 2 weeks of your life.
Hardest 2 weeks of my entire life. Okay?
Yeah,
that was a living
I'm
hell.
Sure. But what's this Yang bucks thing you're talking about?
Yang bucks. Don't you know this candidate for presidency? Yang bucks. It's the new rage.
Andrew Yang.
Yeah, universal basic income. You get, for just being a citizen of the United States, I guess, you just get $1,000 a month.
Who's going to pay for that?
Nobody. It's free. Isn't that a good deal? You like that? The Yang bucks?
Where is he going to get them? Where is the money supposed to come from?
From rich corporations that don't need it. Amazon didn't even pay any taxes. Let's tax Amazon a little bit more, shall we? These greedy corporations.
If let's say that's true, and that somehow it will be spared from the backs of the middle class, which I find impossible to believe, but let's pretend. These greedy corporations, not unlike Tumbler House,
well,
just the I'd say it. Anyway, the point is that they'll simply pass whatever it costs them on to the consumer, which means prices will, and no doubt, effectively cancel out whatever benefit you get out of your Yang bucks. I mean, let's say right now your expenses are $1,000 a month. Okay.
Okay.
Now the Yang bucks will come in, and all your basic expenses are paid for now, right? And whatever other money you're making, dealing drugs, whatever it is you do,
Okay.
that's gravy. But the whole system kicks in. All the corporations, which after all make their money by producing the services and goods which you were spending your money on in the first place, to say nothing of your landlord. And so your expenses were $1,000 a month. Now they're $2,000 a month.
Well, then just raise Yang bucks to $2,000 or $3,000 a month. Then see, all you have to do is stay one step ahead, right? Am I right? Just stay one step ahead, and everything's gravy.
So then you end up with runaway inflation, and we're back to Berlin in 1922. That's great. That's perfect. Yeah,
I mean, that's a long time away. We'll all be dead by then, and it won't matter. So, let them take care of the mess. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. It's been said throughout history. It's called a Ponzi scheme. Eventually, somebody is stuck paying you it. Well, all I can say is, if Mr. Yang gets his way, I'll be collecting my Yang bucks over here.
What's wrong with a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme? I mean, if you just give adequate, I was serious. We were talking about this with my friend. If you just give adequate disclosure, if you say, okay, yeah, this is what the deal. Do you want to sign up or no?
It's a pyramid scheme, and if you get out in time, you'll make a ton. But if you don't, you'll go into the
Exactly. I mean, it's like gambling, right? The people know the risks. What's wrong with that?
Gosh.
What is wrong with that, Charles?
It's what Social Security is based on.
Exactly. So Social Security is legal,
except
but
it's an inverted pyramid. Oh gosh. Enough madness. Do we have any questions this week? It's a hard world to live in. As Edward D. Wood Jr. tells us, life is a strange place in which to live. And he knew it. That boy knew what he was saying. I tell you what, man. Oh, golly.
Okay. Well, just uh, this morning, we have a new essay from Pope Francis, or excuse me, not Pope Francis, Pope Benedict. Um,
Yes,
so I'm assuming you read it, Charles.
you're assuming correctly. Uh,
What's your
well,
take?
it was about 20%, but thanks for asking. I'm sorry. What my opinion? Very good. Um,
It's not
sorry.
that high. It's not that
No.
high.
20% off a papal document? No, I don't think so. Especially a retired pope. I'm not going to get much. No, honestly, it was first it was good to read. It was fun to read. You know, my first thought was how much I missed reading his stuff when it would come out. There was every day demonstrate that he got stuff. You know, you got to bear in mind that all my life, I've had a very, at best, indifferent relationship with the Pope I've lived under. When I was young, up until I was 17, it was Paul VI, and he, in a certain sense, made our lives hell. I mean, Humane Vitae was a great thing, but it didn't really affect anything in the immediate, and everything else he did just dissolved the world we had known, the Catholic world we had known. John Paul I came and went very quickly, the hand of 1,000 days, so to speak. And then John Paul II did some things I very much liked, and other things I didn't care for at all. Assisi comes to mind. It was very much, some very good, some very bad, but I never felt he really understood the position that the church had put her children into. Then Benedict came. And I always felt from what he wrote, got it. He understood that we had been done over by those in charge. And this letter today is more of the same. He goes after the generation of 68, both in church and to a degree in state. I mean, he makes a glancing reference to the fact that where the West German Constitution in 1948 could explicitly invoke God, and 50 years later they were unable to do that with the European Union, which showed you how far down the hill we'd gone in toto. But having said that, I still feel a certain kind of hurt over his leaving us, and his leaving us to the chaos that we've had since. I feel, I guess, a bit like the British did, a lot of the British people did, when Edward VIII abdicated, the man we lost. At the same time, he sort of gave us a warning. All through his pontificate, I was kind of waiting for something to happen, because I never forgot what he said on his inauguration mass, which was, "Pray for me that I do not flee for fear of the wolves." And that haunted me. It really haunted me, because I thought at the time, what does he mean? Where's he going to go? A pope's pope till he dies. And then my first thought when I got the news back in 2013 of his departure was, I guess we didn't pray enough. And that was, honest to God, that was my very first thought, because that phrase had been sticking around in my head. With every wonderful thing he'd do, my thought was, how long is this going to last? And that niggling phrase kept coming up. And then it happened, and he was gone. Now, where I was very wrong was that I thought he had sufficiently stacked the College of Cardinals that we would get a pope who would be much in his tradition. That didn't happen. We got, instead, a pope who was very much like the priests of my youth, because he was of their age group, and he was that kind of priest. The people that brought in Vatican II's quote-unquote reforms, very often without any reference to Vatican II at all, very brutally, very nastily. If you asked for explanations, the explanations usually didn't make any sense. And if you pointed that out, they'd explode at you. And so this pontificate has been very reminiscent in a lot of ways of my childhood, not in a nice way. But at the same time, a lot of things are much, much better. I mean, Lord knows traditional masses are much more frequent. The ordinariates are off the ground, and that's all because of Benedict. The much higher level of young priests and young seminarians as compared to the older ones, again, very much Benedict's story. So it was good to hear from him again. And it was good once again to read that clear analysis of the problems we face.
Let me read my favorite passage from what he wrote in this essay. What predominates is not a new reverence for the presence of Christ's death and resurrection, but a way of dealing with him that destroys the greatness of the mystery. The declining participation in the Sunday Eucharistic celebration shows how little we Christians of today still know about appreciating the greatness of the gift that consists in his real presence. The Eucharist is devalued into a mere ceremonial gesture when it is taken for granted that courtesy requires him to be offered at family celebrations or on occasions such as weddings and funerals to all those invited for family reasons. The way people often simply receive the Holy Sacrament in communion as a matter of course shows that many see communion as a purely ceremonial gesture. Therefore, when thinking about what action is required first and foremost, it is rather obvious that we do not need another church of our own design. Rather, what is required first and foremost is the renewal of the faith in the reality of Jesus Christ given to us in the Blessed Sacrament. I think it's very interesting because he's making a connection, because this is kind of him commenting on the scandal and the crisis. To me he is linking that to a lack of belief in the real presence of the Eucharist, which is interesting. It makes sense.
Well, it does, because what is the major function of the priest is the salvation of souls. How does he accomplish that? Through offering the sacrifice of the Mass, through forgiving sins, through anointing the sick and the dying, all these things. Now, if his belief in that system, centered and anchored in the Eucharist, is scanty or shoddy or weak, it can't help but have an effect on the entirety of his personality. Everything becomes unreal. And one of the other, I mean, the analysis that the Pope makes of the new morality of the 60s and the effect that it had on the priesthood and on seminaries and so forth. He mentions the case of Bishop Unterner of Saginaw, who showed porn to his seminarians. What do you say to that? And at the time, see, this is where people are a little bit, I'm speaking of older people now, my age and older, are a little dishonest. If on the one hand they embraced the changes of the 60s, and now they're suddenly turning around and saying, oh, how can the church be the, what are you talking about? The church has been what you wanted it to be. The elastic, happy conscience priests you wanted, and now you're complaining because there's a comeuppance, you see. And that too is a point he makes. He points out the fact that pedophilia had acquired a certain respectability in the
Right.
60s. Yep, it sure
That's
had.
weird. Yeah, that was news to me. I didn't know that.
Well, that's because you didn't live through the days of Lolita.
Oh, that
I bet.
stupid novel.
Yeah, it was a very popular novel. But there's more to it than that. And I'll have you know, a friend of mine who's a doctor revealed to me that when the pedo crisis blew in 2002 or whenever it was, 2001, the first time, the APA, the American Psychological Association, had been on the verge of removing pedophilia from the list of mental illnesses as they had removed homosexuality 20 years prior. So if it had not been for the big Priestley thing, you know. So I'm think of something culture that's constantly screaming, have sex, have sex, have sex, have sex, have sex. All right. Well, see, that's going to hit people with different tastes in different ways.
Yeah.
Now, everyone has drives of that sort. Everyone is attracted to someone or something. The majority of people are attracted to members of the opposite sex of more or less their own age. But not everyone is. And those who are not struggle with their attractions and so forth. The last thing they need is a society that's telling them, do it, 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 do it. And then turns around when they do as they're told and starts to clutch at their pearls and get all overwrought. Do not complain when you plant evil seed and you harvest something disgusting. Don't complain. And that, in my humble opinion, is what my generation did. Certainly the elders of my generation. One of the terrible things, about being born in 1960 is that while you're technically part of the boom, you get none of the privileges of being a boom, and you get none of the privileges of being an exit. You're just sort of along for the ride.
Mm.
Stuck with the 70s.
Yeah. So, okay,
Uh,
I want to couch this in terms of for some of the let's say hard to please trads. You perhaps might be unsatisfied with Pope Benedict. Said he could do a little bit better. Let me couch what I read in one concise statement, which is it's bad liturgy that is responsible for the current crisis in the church. Is that fair to say? That's what he's saying. It's bad liturgy.
I think he's saying more than that. I think because he does say that the bad liturgy was affected by what was happening outside the church, or rather, it was happening in parallel time. In other words, the two things together, theological and then liturgical decay within the church, parallel the moral decay outside the church. And together, the two created a witch's stew, a witch's cauldron of horror.
Okay.
A perfect storm, as they like to say, when you have disparate things come together and produce something really nasty.
Yeah.
But at any rate, and as I say, it was just great to hear that clear voice again.
It was. I was actually very sad too when I was reading, because I was like, man, we miss him. Really miss him.
Yeah, I mean, when he was Pope, it was like every time you turned around, he either did or said or began something great. After the first couple of years, it was like he was opening a toy box and, hey, look at this one. All right, let's keep this one out.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, for me personally, and like what I'm looking for is understanding from the hierarchy. Like they understand what's going on. They understand the problems. They understand the frustrations. And so that's what I'm personally looking for. Even though it's not important that I receive that, that's what I emotionally look for. And Pope Benedict has that completely.
Yeah. He always felt as though you would read him, you always felt that he realized what you were being put through.
Yeah. Yes.
which I never really spoke John Paul II,
Yeah. Neither.
who
Yeah.
he seemed to be writing from
Well.
someplace above and beyond.
Yeah.
And then Paul VI, other than Humane Vitae, he just seemed to enjoy throwing logs on the fire.
Yeah.
Until he wrote Humane Vitae, then he kind of clammed up because of all the torture they put him through. And now, of course, the current fellow, as I say, it's bringing me back to 1968.
Yeah. Okay. On to the questions. Okay. First question is from Nicholas Williams. When I was in college, I noticed that a majority of the priests would talk about themselves heavily during their homilies. I was reminded of that this morning when listening to a Father Cedric who has a radio program. I believe that these priests mean well and are not trying to be narcissistic. Was this type of preaching encouraged and taught in seminaries? Is it still? Historically, was there a method which could be called the Catholic way to preach?
Well, firstly, I don't know if it's encouraged in seminaries. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Uh,
It
the way our priest teaches, or excuse me, preaches, it's as if it was at least before Vatican II, because he always says that, oh, I shouldn't talk about myself, and then he does the personal anecdote. Like, he very reluctantly does it, but he only does it when it's to communicate a point effectively in a way that nothing else would really do.
Well, but before Vatican II, they had a method of teaching in seminary, preaching, which was called sacred eloquence. That was the title for it.
Interesting.
And there was a method and a manner to it. And of course, that varied from country to country and language to language. In French, they would talk about the grand séminaire style of preaching. Very, florid and emotional. There were, however, the realization, again, in the United States and in English and in the 20th century and the 19th century, there was the realization that not every priest is a tremendous speaker. And to make up for this, there were volumes of published sermons, usually, books of them, usually priest could use if he didn't trust his own sermon writing abilities, because there were certain priests who were renowned preachers, and they would very often do this. They would write books of sermons. Don't forget too that a lot of preaching went on at parish missions that were they're much more common than they are now. Very often, a parish mission would be an annual event. I don't know too many parishes that have them now as annual events. And basically would have a priest from one of the orders come in, a Dominican or a Passionist or someone like that. He'd give the parish mission for the week. And every night there'd be Vespers, Benediction, and a rip-roaring sermon about, getting your mind right, getting right with the load. Just really, really slamming into it. And very often saying things, denouncing sins and so forth, in a way that the regular parish priest didn't feel comfortable doing because he had to see the same people every week. Whereas you bring a priest in from outside, and he can really slam the thing because he doesn't know these people. And he can, be upfront and forward about the human condition in a way that somebody who's got to deal with these people every day and every week would feel perhaps reluctant to. I mean, let's face it, if a priest is getting along well with his parishioners, even though he hears their confessions and all that, he probably doesn't want to give them the fire and brimstone that we all need from time to time.
Yeah.
So the parish mission made a lot of sense. And the parish missionaries were very eloquent preachers, as a rule. And then you had people like Bishop Sheen, who was renowned as a preacher, early on. But you've got to bear in mind that there were a lot more opportunities preaching than there are now. Not just because there were generally more masses said, But because Vespers and Benediction was said in most bigger parishes every Sunday, and families would go, what was very, very common before Vatican II was someone would go to communion early in the day, then go out for breakfast, come back, high mass, then they go out for the Sunday, and then come back in the evening for Vespers and Benediction. That was the way a lot of people lived. So, and of course, there would be a bit of a sermon with Vespers and Benediction. Not, I mean, if it was the parish priest, it wouldn't be the rip-roaring mission sermon, but it would be something. So, but at any rate, to answer the question specifically, I do not think they were encouraged to talk about themselves that much, especially the parish clergy. You know, if you're denouncing sin and you're using yourself as an example, I don't even want to hear no sermon like that. Now, my brethren, let us talk about adultery. I will illustrate the evils of adultery from my own life. Father, no. No, we don't want to hear this sermon, Father. Let's not. Well, then, let's move on to another sin. No, Father. No, we don't want to hear about your sins. So, I really cannot conceive of a good old-fashioned parish mission preacher using himself as a major example in his sermons.
Okay. All right, next question. Another question from Nicholas Williams. While this may make my fellows in the executive dining hall uncomfortable...
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Nick is one of the executives.
Big Takes money. More than money, pal, to keep your position.
I would like to ask about the church's position on usury.
Uh-oh.
Ooh. I was under the impression that a productive loan, one where the borrower gains due to the nature of their investment, had created a situation wherein the charging of interest was licit. For example, when you buy a house, it most often gains in value. Thus, it would be fair for a bank to share in the gain via interest. However, I have discovered that Pope Benedict XIV had already taken this into account when he reiterated that usury is sinful, including the charging of interest on productive loans. Has this teaching developed further? How would a bank be able to profit from lending without charging interest?
Good question, and one that I'm not too terribly well qualified to answer, but that won't keep me from giving it the old college try, especially because I'm at college. So, rah-rah, sis-boop-bah, let me pull out my raccoon coat. We'll heat up the old Stutz Bearcat, and, you know, get our pork pie hat on and do it for old Ivy. All right. Well, usury, of course, the charging of money and interest is condemned by our Lord. So we know that it's not a good thing because he didn't condemn things that were good. We know, too, that there were even religious orders that were dedicated during the Middle Ages to dealing with loans. Their methods of dealing with loans, however, required collateral. It was true, I believe, also what were called the Mons Pietatis, the mountains of piety, specific loan operations in Catholic countries. And basically, if you wanted a loan, you bring something worth, let's say you wanted a loan of 100 guineas or florins or whatever it is that they're doing in your area. So you bring a item of wealth, of worth that you've got in your hands on, worth at least 100 guineas. That's the collateral. And you rush off with your 100 guineas. Now, they were, if you didn't pay your loan back, they would sell the item in collateral. But you would be entitled to anything over the 100 guineas. So in other words, you brought grandma's gold ring, it sells for 140 guineas because you defaulted on the loan. They keep the 100 guineas, you get your 40 guineas back. I don't know how a bank would operate like that today. because, of course, our entire system is based on usury.
Our entire system too incorporates more risk, which is interesting because we talked about this before. But it just occurred to me that under this old system, there's actually zero risk by the bank because it's like, okay, I lend someone $100, but they put up $100 in collateral. So if it doesn't work out, we just get our money back.
Yeah, but they don't make much of a profit.
Right. Well, that's a good part.
They made. I think they were allowed to tiny amount of interest to keep functioning.
Right.
It wasn't much. And as I say, sorry.
No, but I'm like compared to our day, where in terms of the risk, I mean, where you can lend out. I don't know what it's at now. If it's 5, 10, or 20 times the amount of your deposits, that's an enormous amount of risk.
Well, it is, and of course, if which God forbid, if all this were ever called in, the whole system would collapse.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that would look like. I don't think anyone does.
My grandmother did.
Well,
you
yeah.
know what? It's funny. It's funny how people can change, how people are different based on their life experiences. She always put money in the mattress. Never trusted banks ever again. But going through what she went through, how can you, how can you be any other way?
No, well, it's true, and of course, at least with us, which it did over here in Germany and Austria and so on, when the money itself isn't worth anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
The old joke in Germany during the Great Inflation of 1922 was that this woman, because the money would keep dropping in value over the course of a day, so people would do their shopping in the morning because you didn't want to wait till the afternoon when it'd be worth even less.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how bad it was. So one morning, this woman stuffed 2 big bags of money and filled with paper money, and she takes them out of the market. She sets them down because they're too big to bring into the store. Yeah. She goes into the store, and she gets the few items that she could afford to buy, and she goes out to get the money, and she found she'd been robbed. Someone had stolen the baskets and left the money out.
Wow. Is that a true story?
No, they say no. I wasn't in Berlin in 1922.
No, okay.
I only arrived about a year later.
In that sort of situation, it's probably... I mean, if your money's losing value day by day, I guess you would just... the prudent thing to do is just stock up as much as you can. Literally dump all your money, get as much goods that you can get, and then just, okay.
That's what people did. I mean, there's other... True was definitely true. Famous tale. In Budapest, after World War II, well, after World War I, I should say, is when the story starts. There were these 2 brothers, and their parents were very wealthy, and they died. And they divided their fortune. Older brother, younger brother, each got half. Well, the older brother invested very carefully, wisely, banked the money, did everything you're supposed to do. The younger brother was a ne'er-do-well and just spent it drinking champagne. And when he'd finish a bottle of champagne, he'd stick it under in his basement in his house. And this went on for a good 25 years. And then World War II came, and then the communists came, and the bottom dropped out of the Hungarian florin. The money was worthless, absolutely worthless. So the younger brother, the older brother was wiped out. Every dime he had was gone. The younger brother was able to sell for hard currency all that glass that had accumulated in his basement over the many years, and got enough money out of that sale to get him and his brother out of the country.
And that's a true story.
It's a true story.
What a sick twist of fate. Boy.
I think it's a wonderful moral. I don't know what it is, but I like it.
That's like God with a sense of humor or something. Like, oh, well, okay.
You didn't think he had a sense of humor? What I like is the fact that the younger brother thought enough of the older brother, who must have been giving him a hard time all those years, thought enough of him to take him with.
the younger brother must have been like, well, I mean that must have been like comeuppance. Like,
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
well, I guess I can bail you out. I mean, you've been so irresponsible in terms of your investing and everything.
Always banking everything. My gosh. Instead of doing what you should have done, which is drink it up. Yeah. Well, virtue is its own reward, as we know. No, so at any rate, to return to the question, though, I really, we are in such a weird setup, such a strange situation, where you literally cannot live without participating in usury, unless you go off the grid. So I don't really have a satisfactory answer for you. I mean, if you have a credit card, and who doesn't? If you have a debit card, and who doesn't? If you've got a bank account, and who doesn't? You're participating in usury.
Yeah.
So,
all right, next question is from Luke. Charles, one of the most compelling arguments for monarchy concerns the state's finances. In a democracy, the temporary leaders of the state are not personally liable for any public debts accrued during their time in office. Debts are to be paid by future, equally non-liable politicians. In contrast, a monarch and his heirs are personally liable for any debts accrued during his reign. A monarch can be forced into personal bankruptcy and be compelled to liquidate his personal assets, including government property. Are you aware of any historical illustrations of this concept? Your thoughts would be most appreciated. Thank you. P.S. The present value of the United States' unfunded entitlements is now twice all of the assets on Earth, minus real estate. I have a hard time believing a Catholic monarch would let things get so out of hand.
Well, it all depends. I mean, Louis XVI was in precisely that position. That's what precipitated the French Revolution. If you recall, the French had fought a series of wars with the English, one after the other. And because the English system allowed the government to extract money out of the taxpayer in a way the French system simply didn't, inevitably, even if the French outgeneraled and outfought the English, they'd run out of money. And that would be the end of that war. So, Louis XVI becomes king in 1774. It's a whole bunch of different reforms in the French government to save money. These bore fruit alongside his naval and military reforms in the sense that the French were at last to fight a successful war against Britain and defeat them. That's the war we call the American Revolution. Now, which the French fought not only in America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, in India, and on the high seas. It's interesting that the last battle of the American Revolution was fought in India, which people don't really realize was after Yorktown. At any rate, so the thing was that Louis XVI's reform enough to enable the French to beat the British in that war, but it still ended up virtually bankrupting the country. So, where did this bear fruit? Well, it was okay as long as things burbled on normally. But then in 1788, there was a big volcano that erupted in Iceland. And this had the effect of wiping out a chunk of the French crops in 1788. And you had a famine called the Great Hunger. And in normal times, what the king would have done is either brought grain to the royal granaries or borrowed money to buy grain to distribute. But because of the American Revolution, he had no credit left. So, no grain to provide the sufferers of the Great Famine. And that is what caused him to call the Estates General, and that's what got the French Revolution underway. So, you're right. Now, there was on a much smaller scale, I think it was around 1909, the Grand Duke of Luxembourg went virtually bankrupt and ended up having to sell most of his properties rather than have the state default. So it's true. And then, of course, in Britain and Belgium and Spain and Italy and so forth, At different times, the kings made, as it were, presents of all of their estates and so forth to the parliament or the government in return for an allowance. Personally, I don't think that's a good idea. The reason why I don't think it's a good idea is that it removes the independence of the crown.
Mm.
It makes them dependent on the government of the day for money. I mean, and that's the reason why the politicians tend to like that sort of a setup. Imagine, if you will, that the Queen did not. I mean, as it stands, the revenue from the crown lands in Britain is 80% over what is actually expended on the monarchy. The royal family, the palaces, all that stuff. They're only 20% of the total income from the crown lands, but 100% of the crown lands income goes to the government. The government, in return, give the Queen 20%. So effectively, she pays 80% tax.
Okay.
Now, imagine that that weren't the case at all. Imagine that instead, she got the 80%. I mean, she got the whole thing and just turned over 80% to the government as a sort of tax for the running of the country. That would put her and put the royal family in a completely different position vis-a-vis the government. And of course, the taxpayer would know immediately without that he wasn't funding the monarchy.
Yeah.
He's funding the government, he's funding the politicians, but he's not funding the monarchy.
Mm.
So, but to answer your question, yeah, I think it's a better system that the monarch have his own income and pay for things out of it. It was interesting that in England, Charles I, when he was king, before he was killed, oddly enough, he called Parliament into session, the first Parliament of his reign. They got into a bit of a fight, so he dismissed Parliament, and for 10 years he ruled without Parliament and funded the government strictly from the revenue from the crown lands.
Say that again. He funded what?
The running of England strictly from the revenue for the crown lands and from other income, customs and ship tax, things like that, stuff that the king directly administered. So he didn't have to call Parliament, because you only call Parliament basically to get taxes levied. And if you weren't going to have taxes levied, if you weren't going to have taxes raised, if you didn't need more money than what you were spending out of your own income, what need did you have of Parliament? So for 10 years, he ruled without Parliament, the King's Peace. But then he tried to get the Scots to accept a liturgy. They rebelled. You had the Scots War, and he had to call Parliament to get money to fight them. And that was what got the English Civil War rolling.
Mm.
You know, sad days, sad days.
Yeah. Okay.
What else we got?
Okay. Next, another question from Luke. I adored Puritan's Empire.
Yay!
Yay! Okay, I just read it. I am left incredibly impressed. I was most interested to read your thoughts on General Sir William Howe. Or as I refer to him as General Scumbag Howe. Howe was both a Whig in Parliament and outspoken member of the King's opposition. Is there a case to be made that Howe was more of a Republican than George Washington? Or perhaps that is much too far? After all, as you write on page 114, George Washington was originally opposed to independence. Is there an argument to be made that Howe was more anti-monarchy and Republican than Washington? Or am I deeply confused?
You're not deeply confused, but it is too much to say. He was not a Republican in the sense of wanting to get rid of the monarchy, but he opposed any monarchy that was anything beyond being a mere figurehead. The king was restoring the monarchy of Great Britain to what it was, Queen Anne. That is to say, somewhat approaching our presidency. Not completely balances, but pretty much the center of things. Howe was very much against this. And there is a good deal of evidence, which I deal with in the book, to suggest that he threw the revolution, at least his part of it. He had 3 or 4 opportunities in which he had Washington like so, and he let him escape every time.
That was one of my big takeaways from the book. I think you make a pretty clear-cut case. I mean, he disobeyed orders. I mean, it wasn't just like a matter of him taking individual initiative. He was, okay, this is what you're ordered to do. You need to do this. You need to execute, what is this triple-pronged plan? There was like a certain plan. And then he just sort of like, oh, okay, I'll just kind of float over here.
But he did.
And that just bothers me because it's like he threw the game. It's like you know, I don't want to say like war's like a sporting event, but it's like, you know, there's some notion of fair play. You know what I mean? Like, you won because you outsmarted, you outmuscled, or you did this, not because you know, this other guy's paid off or whatever, and he just threw the game.
Well, let's put it this way. It was more important to Howe that the king be defeated in England and America than that the colonies remain part of the empire.
Yeah, see, I mean, well, there you go. See, that just bothers me, the notion of fair play with that. It's like,
well,
to me, it's more like, that may the best side win or whatever. And he just like, oh, okay, well, sorry guys, bye. Okay.
It was not Britain's finest hour. Churchill would not have said this. If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last 1,000 years, men shall still say this was their finest hour. I mean, you could say it about the Battle of Britain. You couldn't say it about Sir William Howe.
Did he gain for himself a very poor reputation for his actions in battle?
Yeah.
At least? Yeah.
Yeah, people were pretty much aware. When he went home and he took up a seat in Parliament, which was a good thing for him because, you know, you can't arrest members of Parliament for most crimes. They've got what's called parliamentary immunity.
Right.
So they faced a board of inquiry. They put one on for him, and they said, you know, why'd you let him keep getting away? And his response was, the answer to that question is political, and I choose not to give it.
I'll take the Fifth Amendment. I'll take the Fifth. Wow.
And all I can say is, if Britain was such a horrible tyranny that he could have gotten away with that.
Ooh.
Just that I mention it.
Well, anyhow, I don't know. I guess in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, but or maybe it does. No. I don't know, but just one of the unsavory characters in history to me.
Not one of my favorites either. Who else we got? What else we got?
All right. Next question. Would Charles discuss the miracle of the Holy Fire in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem that is coming up on Great Saturday, the day preceding Orthodox Easter? Is this a valid miracle? If so, is it true that only the Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem can cause this miracle and that a Catholic cannot? Is that what they say?
Some do.
Interesting.
Some say that. I mean, basically, from very, very early days, you have the miracle of the new fire at Jerusalem. Now, according to Dom Guéranger, that miracle is not what happens now. What happens now, he claims, was an imposture and a fraud. I don't know that that's true. Whether or not that's true, we can't really tell. Certainly no Catholic has been in a position to do the miracle of the new fire, because the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem is the successor of the Patriarchs of Jerusalem, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. This began with the Crusades and was renewed in the 1840s. Has never tried, never attempted. There's never been a question of it. So, Is it a miracle or is it a fraud? The answer is, I don't know. It could be. Whether or not a Catholic, whether or not a Greek patriarch of Jerusalem communion with Rome, I don't know. We know that they did do it. They certainly did it when they were in communion with Rome. And that was a miracle at that time. Whether it's still continued and it's not an imposture, I don't know. If it's not an imposture, whether it would suddenly stop if the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem came back into communion with the Pope, I don't know. That would be an experiment. Have him come back into communion with the Catholic Church, and if it stops happening, we'll know a Catholic can't do it. The last point I'll make on all of this is that the current schism does not date to 1054, but to 1463. And in 1463, the union that existed at that time was broken by Patriarch Gennadios II at the order of the Sultan, who would put him in place precisely for that purpose. I don't recognize schisms ordered by sultans. If that weren't enough, in 1964, Paul VI of Athenagoras II lifted the excommunications, the personal excommunications, which were the only legal basis of the schism in the first place. So we're talking about a schism that, whatever legal basis it had, was ordered by a sultan, and which legal basis was in any case in 1964. So, I ain't gonna recognize no schism. And as we all know, ladies and gentlemen, in trad world, our personal opinions mean a lot. It matters so much to everybody on all sides that I won't recognize the schism. I have my doubts that anyone's really going to care. But to my Orthodox friends, I say, you're only a schismatic if you want to be. And to my Catholic friends, I say, you're only a Catholic if you want to be.
Okay.
Well, I've told you the story of the Serbian lady who had come to believe in papal supremacy and purgatory just by following the prayers of her own church. She was Serbian Orthodox, and she threw these things at me like I was going to say she was wrong. Now, this was under the rule of the great and glorious Cardinal Mahony, who had just issued a document on the Eucharist, in which he had said that Christ is present at the Eucharist in memory and in hope. And I remember thinking at the time, so who's the Catholic? His Eminence or the Serbian lady?
You said that Catholics will tolerate any amount of heresy, but no schism.
Yeah. Especially, sorry?
No, I had a question regarding to that. Let's see here. What does a hierarch have to do to be charged with heresy nowadays?
I don't know.
Because we learned from Cardinal Mahony that you can deny the real presence of the Eucharist and get no problems, except from a little nun from Alabama. No one else will mind.
No.
So, I mean, if you can deny the real presence of the Eucharist, to me, it seems like everything else is on the table.
Well, it is. We'll tolerate any amount of heresy. But
yeah.
God forbid you should be a schismatic like those evil SSPXs.
Ooh.
Ooh, indeed. Ooh, indeed. Then we get all upset and excited. Ooh, is this schismatic? I mean, contrariwise, with the Orthodox, you'll never hear them denying the real presence. You'll never hear them attacking doctrine. But they're excommunicating each other like nobody's business. Old calendar versus new calendar, and now, God help us, Constantinople and Moscow.
That leads me to sort of another question, which is, whenever I hear, hierarchs or priests talk about other priests, they are so easy on other priests, like, as if, like, it doesn't matter who it is, even, I mean, even Pope Benedict calling Ronner quote unquote a great theologian.
Mm.
Uh, were priests always so nice to other priests? I think this is part of the problem. It's like no one wants to criticize anyone else, it's even like regardless. Like, oh, we can't, oh, this cardinal denied the real presence of the Eucharist. It's crickets from everybody. No one speaks up. It's like a sort of pay it forward type situation. Like, okay, I'm nice to you, you're nice to me, and then everybody, don't make waves. Everything's fine.
It's called professional courtesy, and it's ruined us. I mean,
When did that kick in? Is that just simply Vatican II, or
no,
is it?
it's human nature. I mean, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, is the way life is. It's certainly there have been times when the clergy have been, shall we say, a little more rambunctious with each other than they are now. But generally speaking, they're very rarely upfront with their annoyances. I mean, they may speak privately about things, but there's an unspoken belief, I think, that if any priest or any bishop attacks another publicly, no matter how egregious what they do it may be, you're somehow weakening the whole tribe in the face of the laity.
That's got to be because we've gone to extremes on that end.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's and it's gotten. I mean, you know that you know that there are some priests. Well, I mean, like at the end of Pope Benedict's letter, he thanks Pope Francis very fulsomely for the light he's given us.
I saw that.
Now, mind you, it was a very interesting way he put it, because he said when he gives us light.
Okay.
What else we got?
Next question. We've lingered on this one a little bit. Yeah. Okay. I am curious why we do not celebrate the saints of the Old Testament, the patriarchs, prophets, judges, etc., as much as saints that came after Christ. Why isn't there a bigger devotion to them, such as naming churches after them or having holy days and novenas for them?
Well, I think several reasons. They are commemorated actually liturgically, or at least in the old December Christmas, the forerunners of our Lord, Christmas Eve. The Eastern rites of the Church have several commemorations of them. But I think the reason for this is that none of them went to heaven when they died, for starters. They lingered in the limbo of the fathers until our Lord freed them on Holy Saturday. And then they went to heaven when they ascended with him at the Ascension. So they were not saints from the get-go the way the saints of the New Testament have been. And then, of course, there's the question of them never having had the sacraments. They're not being saints in quite perhaps the same sense as the saints of the new dispensation are. But it's a good question and a fair one.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's it's just a little different probably because it's like saints have Jesus and Mary as the models, where it's like, the prophets, they were good in that sense, but they didn't have Jesus obviously as a model yet. So it's sort of a different sort of approach or worldview a little bit, even though it's the same.
Well, I mean, they were looking forward to a Messiah, but they didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
And they didn't. It was not possible, as I say. One of the stupidest things I ever read was by a Catholic commentator that said that Catholics have to somehow get rid of the coming of Christ changed history. No, it did change history completely and totally. And one of the ways it changed history was that instead of the vague expectation of a Messiah of some kind who would come at some point, he's been here, and not only can we know him as an historic figure, we can literally physically become part of him on a daily basis, or he of us. And so we know him in an intimate way that would be completely beyond the ken of the people of the Old Testament, of the chosen people of the Old Testament. As far as everybody else, they were in even darker darkness, if that were possible. One of the things that's interesting is when you look at the Hinduism and the ancient classical religions and so on. So many of them had elements of what one supposes was the original revelation given mankind, a triune God, a coming Savior, that kind of thing. But the Jews kept it all in its greatest purity. But even so, it was not the religion of the New Testament. It was not the religion of the Messiah who would come and made himself known, intimately connected to his people. But anyway, there you go.
Who's the person that said that Christ's coming did not change history?
Well, I want to say it was either I think it was Michael Novak. It could have been Robert Novak, but I think it was Mike. It was one of the Novaks, and they were not related. They're both Catholic.
Okay, next question is from Timothy Martin. How should Catholic monarchists view King James I, Guy Fawkes, and the Gunpowder Plot in regards to the divine right of kings? Is there further reading you would recommend on the topic? Is there ever a reason Catholics should support violent actions against a monarch?
Well, there are several things here all at once, so we've got to, as they like to say today, unpack it.
What's wrong with saying that? Is that a shot at me? I said that last episode.
Did you?
Yeah, I did, when we unpacked distributism.
Ah, that's right. No, but it's a newish phrase. I wasn't teasing you specifically.
Okay.
But it's a phrase
I like
in
that
academia.
phrase. I like that.
All right.
Let's
unpack that phrase. Let's unpack unpacking. Yeah. You got any suitcases? Anyway, back the question. Firstly, what was the question again? The
Guy Fawkes, is it?
Guy Fawkes. Well, here's the thing. The idea of the divine rights, as often in Protestant England, was that basically the king is utterly responsible to no one but God, which is true, and that no one but God can depose him, which is not necessarily true. So, is it permissible to act violently against a king if the king is a tyrant? But as the just war theory, just revolt has a lot of caveats. You've got to be very sure, number one, that the evils which will inevitably result from your action will be less than doing nothing.
Yes, this is very reminiscent of oh gosh, I can't remember his name. But we did one of the earliest episodes we did. One of my favorite segments was the vigilantism question. The guy who tried to overthrow Hitler, or not overthrow. Stauffenberg. There we go.
And this is there's a slight difference here because, of course, Hitler was merely an elected politician,
right,
who had arrogated control, etc. He wasn't a crowned and anointed monarch,
right.
So the question would be, for instance, would it have been all right against Henry VIII?
Yes.
And this is where this kind of question now comes in. There were several revolts under the Tudors, Henry VIII, called the Pilgrimage of Grace. But that was not about killing the king or even doing violence to him. The monasteries. So it's a little different. And similarly, the rising in the West against the Book of Common Prayer in 1549. But again, that was not to overthrow or kill King Edward VI, but to force him to withdraw the Book of Common Prayer. And then lastly but not leastly, the rising in the North in 1569 against Queen Elizabeth I was not to overthrow the rightful monarch, but to put the rightful monarch on the throne. A bit of a different thing. In other words, if you're leading a revolt to restore someone you consider to be the rightful monarch, it's a bit different from rebelling against a rightful monarch, if you see what I'm saying. Someone you acknowledge as the king. Now, so that's the first thing. The terrible results that will undoubtedly result from your action must be less than doing nothing. And the second is that you've got a reasonable hope for success. The third is that, well, it's like it. The first is that the faith is definitely under attack and in danger at the time, as opposed to you're merely being inconvenienced. So under those rules, wouldn't it have been better off if James I and Parliament had been blown sky high? Probably not. I mean, it's easy to understand why they felt that would do some good. But one thing that the reign of Charles I showed us was that the real danger to the Catholics came from the oligarchy that dominated Parliament of the king. And just blowing up Parliament would have been simply blowing up the hands, not and those hands would have grown back. I have no doubt that had they succeeded, it was bad enough what happened to the faithful in the wake of the Guy Fawkes plot. But what would have happened to them had they succeeded? I can't begin to imagine. Now, having said that, we're not living under the conditions they were living under. So while I don't think they were justified in doing what they were doing, I think that in all likelihood, their guilt was ameliorated by the conditions under which they had to live. Conditions the like of which none of us are undergoing at the moment. Our Chinese brethren are. Now with the knowledge that the Holy See is on the side of the government.
I don't like thinking those thoughts, Charles.
No, I'm sorry. Reality is painful.
Cardinal Zen is turning over in his grave.
Yeah, but Cardinal Parolin is grinning. You know, I've always thought Parolin sounded like some weird chemical. Yeah, you should spread a little Parolin on that. You know, a little bit of Parolin on that. Yeah, it'll fix up that crack in the wall. You stick some Parolin in there, like new. You run some paint on that. A little bit of Parolin goes a long way. No, it's true. No, my brother's a contractor. He uses Parolin all the time. I mean, it's the greatest thing. It's wonderful. And, you know, you can use it on glass. But you got to use the right kind, though. Not any Parolin. There's heavy-duty Parolin, the kind you use in walls. But then there's like this gossamer Parolin, and they use that to stop up the cracks in glass. And, you know, you can do it in colored glass, too, but it's got to be tinted Parolin then. And it's got to be the right color tint. I mean, obviously, you're going to use green Parolin to go into green stained glass. You don't want to use the wrong color. You can see the cracks. I mean, you might as well just leave them if you're going to do that. But Parolin is a wonderful, wonderful stuff. Whoever invented it, I'm hats off. He's revolutionized the building trade. So my advice, if you're going to do any home repair work, you run down to your hardware store and get your double barrel of Parolin.
I love how your animosity towards some of these people manifests itself in such colorful ways. Between Parolin and seepage.
Well, see, that's the thing. You know, you got some seepage here in this wall, so you got to plug it with Parolin. Otherwise, the whole wall's going to collapse in 20 years. I think it's wonderful.
No, I love it. It's great.
Now, see, the one problem is if you don't do the parallel right, you got to chisel it out. No, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. There was an actual thing called plastolim, which they made toy soldiers out of, which was so. And parallel makes me think it was something of that sort.
I see.
But anyway, yeah, I hope that he gets spread all over some wall, preferably one that's undergone seepage.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I mean that in the nicest way imaginable.
All right, our last question for today is from Thomas.
All right.
First-time questioner, long-time watcher here in upstate New York.
I believe we call that a lurker in the trade.
Lurker. Okay, that's good.
Lurker.
Yeah.
All right. No, lurkers are fine.
Lurkers are
for
fine.
Lurkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently read a blog post on Spirit Daily entitled "The Metaphysics of Space Travel" that engaged my imagination. Essentially, it leaves open the question of outer space as reaching the boundaries between this world and the next. It made me think of Lewis's Dr. Ransom describing the fullness of space rather than its emptiness. My question to Charles, is there any tradition in the church regarding the metaphysics of space, whether it's from church fathers or from theologians of the space age? Thanks, and keep up the good work. That's a great question. Yeah.
It is. Firstly, welcome, lurker. Bear in mind, too, that I'm a little sensitive on this topic.
Oh? Why is that?
Where did I go to college?
Roswell,
New Mexico. Yes, that's right. And so whenever people find that out, they ask me, what about the saucer that crashed in Roswell? And I always have to say, they always ask about the one that crashed. They never ask about the one that accomplished its mission.
Pretty creepy, Charles.
Oh, well, creepy is where we all live now. Anyway, anyway, so as far as the metaphysics of space travel and all that go, no, not really. Pius XII speculated in some detail about extraterrestrial life. And more recent theologians and all that have talked about the possibilities. If there is life in outer space, for instance, a la Lewis's speculations in the Space Trilogy. Did it participate in the fall? Would there be a need of redemption? Would Christ appear in one way on Earth and in many, many other ways in many, many other planets? Or was the fall restricted to Earth a la Lewis? There have been some people who have questioned about that. Traditionally, especially back when we were all geocentrists, the space was simply seen as the heavens, literally a la Dante. So I don't think there's been much of a metaphysics of space travel. There have been, in recent years, you've had a few people write about it. Catholic-esque figures like James Blish and Ray Bradbury. But the Anthony Boucher comes to mind, another one, Walter Miller. But the answer is not really, somewhat, a few people. But you got to bear in mind that the whole question is very new as far as the church sees things. Just as before the discovery of the New World, there really wasn't all that much written about unknown continents.
It's funny that this question should come right now because I was just thinking about this. My girlfriend is having us run through Star Trek Voyager, which is one of the more recent versions of Star Trek. And we just had an episode, we just barely watched the episode on Monday, where Tom Paris, one of the characters, he drives at warp 10, which is like infinite speed. And that freaked me out. Like the metaphysics of that freaked me out. Like what happens when you travel infinite? What does that mean? Like, are there limits to outer space? I mean, what are you doing? How is that possible? So I've been wondering about this. Like, where are the limits? What happens if you like go a certain speed? Like, where do you end up going?
No one knows. What's outer space? And if there are, could there be anything beyond outer space? Is it really infinite? What does that mean? I
Exactly.
don't know. You search me. I'm just here with the elves and fairies, and of course my fellow aliens from Roswell. I don't know. Anything, and mind you, it's a great thing for the Catholic emancipation, that true Catholic imagination to speculate upon. It's a great thing to do, and we should, if you've got that kind of a mind and that kind of an interest. Obviously, you've had people who are unbelievers like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and people like that who have generally dominated science fiction. But they're not the only ones. There certainly have been Catholic writers of science fiction. Jules Verne, probably the most famous.
Who's your favorite one? Is it something Clark?
Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, isn't he sci-fi?
Yeah.
Do androids dream of electric sheep? Is that him?
That's him. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, good. Yeah, I read that one, and they turned it into Blade Runner, kind of. And yeah, there we go.
He wasn't. He was sort of a weird kind of guy.
Yeah, that's why you like him.
Well, that's true. I do like weird people. That's what allows me to survive in the world we live in, and love people as I do.
Yes.
I love everyone.
Yeah.
Because I love really weird people.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you what that means. I'll leave everyone to figure it out on themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an old that 2 out of every 3 people are normal, and 1 is goofy. So you find yourself at a dinner, right? Look at the person next to you. Seems okay. Person on your other side, it's all right. Who does that leave?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, indeed. But remember, as Arthur C. Clarke once said to Carl Rahner and to Taylor de Chardin, it's not the UFO you're looking for that gets you. It's the UFO you shoot down.
You know...
He said that during the Battle of Los Angeles.
Yeah, you're creating like this alternate universe with all these people.
What are you talking about?
You've got Desjardins and Ronner on the gun shooting at the aliens, and then you've got transgender Winston Churchill right next to them, and the wind is blowing his wig off.
His wig off.
Yeah.
I told you all that. Yeah. But he's still smoking his cigar. Look, the Battle of Los Angeles brought out everything that was truly best in planet Earth.
Develop this a little more, Charles, and then call up Tim Burton. See if you guys can work something out. I think it would be interesting.
After what he did to Dark Shadows, I don't know.
Yeah, he's kind of petered out.
It was kind of sad. I grew up on Dark Shadows, really. I suppose that shows.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. It's been fun here in Usury. We have a book to do.
We have a book. You're jumping the gun. Book
today?
No, I'm
not jumping.
Oh, okay.
Book to do.
Okay, I thought you were skedaddling out of here. Okay. Book today. An Exorcist Tells His Story by Father Gabriel Amorth. I've read this book. It's a best-selling book, to be honest. Very good book. They actually have a sequel and then like a third book after this. I haven't read the third book. Second book's pretty good, but not as good as the first book. First book, best book. And so let's see here. Some interesting things. Father Amorth is kind of unintentionally funny on the way he handles some of these things, like helpful tips to see if your buddy is possessed. If their eyes are rolling in the back of their head, they might be possessed. If they're levitating, they might be possessed. If they're speaking in ancient languages like Aramaic or Assyrian. They might be possessed. It's not, and these are important tips. You see, it's easy to miss these subtleties. You see, you see your buddy, Joey levitating, eyes rolling back in the head, speaking Aramaic. It's not just too much caffeine. It's like, oh, Joey, you're wigging out. No, you have to call your local exorcist. Okay, it's not the caffeine. Okay, so this is important. We need to pick up these subtleties. You see.
I think that's very important and very true. It's like the meme that I know you've seen. It shows kind of a priest that says it's easy to make fun of the church until you've got a demon in your house.
Yeah, yeah. You're not calling anyone else. You're calling an exorcist. You're calling Father Ripperger, or yeah. So
if you're calling Father Aborth, you're using a Ouija board, which probably defeats the whole point.
Yeah. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, indeed. There's another who was fairly well, Fortea, Fortea. He's a Spaniard.
Interesting. Fortea. Okay.
And he's got a website and all that, as one does these days.
So, yeah. So this book, and I think so. Father Morth, I think is Novus Ordo. I think some people have pointed out and kind of have held it against him, but I'd like to mention that. Because I've read a lot of Father Ripperger, I've listened to a lot of Father Ripperger, and I've read a lot of Father Morth, and I got to tell you, there's a lot of similarities there when it comes to their approach to the demonic. But it makes perfect sense too. It's like, oh, you know what? Oh, like two doctors have the same approach to influenza. Like
if it's objectively true,
yeah,
and we believe it is, then wow. I went to London, and I saw Big Ben. My brother went to London. You'll never guess what he saw.
Right.
Big Ben.
Right. For us normal, peasants, this is sort of abstract principles, sin. But, these guys, they stamp their time card every day. They check in. Like, okay, we got another guy, levitating. Okay, let's figure out the demon's
eyes in the back of his head.
We'll do the black fast. Eyes back in the head. Let's restrain him. Okay, he's got Freemasonry in the family. Okay, we've got that. So, okay, let's say these prayers of binding. Okay, good. These are concrete realities that, they deal with on a daily basis. This isn't some abstraction. This isn't some philosophical thing. So, of course, they're going to have similarities. And to me, personally, I feel that the faith is going to be rejuvenated because it takes these clerics where the faith is a reality, evil is a reality. See, because that's the problem with society is we don't treat these as realities. We treat them as unrealities. We
don't treat the Eucharist as real.
Exactly.
So if we don't supreme good is real, why would we treat supreme evil as real?
Exactly.
Nothing is real. It's all whatever we make of it. Even our own genders aren't real. They're social constructs.
Exactly. And
but this is reality shoved in our faces.
And one of the big things that I believe Father Morth and Ripperger both try to get across to our thick skulls. See, because we have something in our head like, oh, demonic proper, scary. But normal sin and temptation, not scary. And what they try to get across is there are, 4 different types of demonic influence. There's, the temptation, obsession, oppression, and then, the big one, possession, that everyone gets stuck on. And see, we treat the big ones like, oh, Ouija boards, possession, those are the big ones. But after you read and listen to these guys a lot, their point is it's all same. It's demonic influence is demonic influence. So don't be treating one so exalted while the other one we get to discard and ignore, the temptation one. Now Father Amorth, he seemed to say that demons, they might not possess you, but the more you get steeped in mortal sin, the more you become like the demon who is afflicting you, whose job it is to damn you to hell. you become like that demon, and he gets a stronger hold of you, even though you're not possessed. Properly speaking, they get a stronger hold on you, and I think that's very important. And Father Ripperger says the same thing. Where this really comes out, where that principle really comes out, the most important takeaway that I want everyone to know about, whether you read this book or not, whether you listen to Father Ripperger and Father Morth or not, is that confession is more powerful than the rite of exorcism. That's what Father Morth says in this book. When I read that, my jaw dropped, because of movies and priests, and they have there's sort of this exalted feeling of the rite of exorcism, and something as routine as confession is to know that that's exponentially more powerful in terms of exercising what's in us, the evil impulses within us. That totally, I think I doubled my rate of going to confession after I read that.
That'll do it.
And again, it's because I realized, because it's a lack of faith on my part. It's like, oh, well, this is a sacrament, it's routine, and it's all abstract, kind of. It hammers in the reality that there is something very serious and very powerful happening in the rite of reconciliation. So that's what I want for everybody is to grow in faith, and to have real faith in the sacraments, and that our faith is actually real.
And this is Holy Week, so get to confession if you can.
Oh man, yeah, I need to. Whenever we approach, I always make the vow, okay, not gonna sin at all, because I can't deal with these lines. But well, for us, we're recording this so I'm gonna have to go on Saturday. I'm gonna have to go before Palm Sunday, but it's okay. I'll bite the bullet. But yeah,
I mean, you want to hit the confessional before you go through the Triduum.
Yeah, big time.
It's only once a year. I don't think the emotional ups and downs from Monday, Thursday through Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter. Could you imagine doing the emotional ups and downs of Holy Week every week?
Yeah, I tell you,
that'd be kind of rough.
It's been a fun Lent. For the first time, I gave up meat, and it's funny because you tell time based on Sundays.
Yep.
And the first week it's funny how the progression is, because the first week it's like, I don't need to eat meat. It's not a big deal. I think maybe we had pizza with a couple pepperonis on. It's like, I don't need to do this. This is easy. This is easy. But then each subsequent Sunday, it's a little harder. And then I got to last Sunday. I'm waiting till midnight. Man. It gets harder.
It's true. Yeah. One more week,
and then we're released from the bondage. The
bondage of Lent, and then you'll be able to throw yourself at the ham or lamb or whatever you have for Easter.
Yes. What are you having for Easter? We always do ham. What are you having for Easter, Charles?
Lamb.
Lamb. Very appropriate. Solange Hertz always would do lamb on Easter. Very religiously, she would have lamb.
Well, it's they had to do an Easter brunch here for the people. You see, most of the folks are going to be gone for Easter break. But I'm going to be here because I've got to visit sites for Carl and Zita, as I mentioned. So I'm going to be staying at the college, and those of us will still be here going to brunch together on Easter, a lamb. But I think the best Easter I've ever spent since the Easter Bunny stopped coming.
Wait, what?
The best Easter I've spent since the Easter Bunny stopped coming.
I heard you, but how could the Easter Bunny stop coming? I mean, that's like saying Santa stopped coming.
No. After you get to a certain age, he ignores you. He likes kids. Everybody knows that.
Oh, that's true, actually.
He's like Santa Claus. You reach a certain age, and he says, and that's it. He doesn't bother with you anymore. But the Easter Bunny stopped coming. And I mean, not to say my Easters subsequently were bad. Since then was 2014. And the reason was that in 2014, I spent several months in a town called Goshen, Connecticut, near Litchfield. And Holy Week, I spent in a very unusual manner. Maundy Thursday, I went to the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Waterbury, Connecticut. And then Good Friday, I spent at I did the Stations of the Cross at a shrine in Litchfield called Lourdes in Litchfield, which is managed by the Montfort Fathers. And then I went up to the great Abbey of Regina Laudis in Bethlehem, Connecticut, for their Good Friday service. And I went down to New York, and I went to the Vigil Mass of Easter, Tridentine, at Holy Innocents in Manhattan. Then the next morning, I got up, put on my morning coat, striped trousers, top hat, and I went to the Easter Sunday High Mass at St. Agnes. When I was done at St. Agnes, I went with a friend of mine to Fifth Avenue for the Easter parade. And that was an amazing experience, I must say. It was quite the show. And when it was over, I went to the King Cole bar of the St. Regis Hotel for their Easter brunch, and I had deviled and lamb.
Say that again. You had what?
Deviled eggs and lamb. But as I was about to leave, there was some young people at the bar, 3 men, 3 girls, and the men were all in morning coats. And they stopped me and they said, "Sir, you know, you're the youngest man we've ever seen, or the oldest man, rather, we've ever seen in a morning coat." And I said, "Well, it is Easter." So we started to chat, and I introduced them to a drink called the bullshot, you know, vodka and beef bouillon. We had a very, very nice chat, the 7 of us. Then I said, I had up to Greenwich to my cousins for Easter dinner. So I said, "Well, I've got to go, but, you know, before I leave," I said, "we really should sing Easter Bonnet." So we did. But you see, what I hadn't thought of was that everyone in the bar, and it was full with Easter brunchers, everybody in the bar had been in the Easter parade. So the whole place joined in.
Mm.
I'll never forget that to the end of my days. And then I left them, poured myself into the train on Greenwich, went up to Greenwich. My cousin picked me up. We had Easter dinner with my aunt and a bunch of other relatives, and it was ham. Oh, I had eggs, lamb, and ham.
It's quite an Easter.
It was the best since the bunny stopped coming to me.
Wow.
It was. And if you ever get the chance to be in New York for Easter, go to the Easter parade.
Mm.
And if you can't see the Easter parade, at least see the old movie with Fred Astaire and Judy Garland.
What movie?
Easter Parade.
Oh, Easter. Okay. What are the Easter colors? What do you you always refer to Easter colors? What's the term for them?
A morning coat or a morning.
No, an actual like light green, light pink.
Oh, the pastels.
The pastels.
The pink, the yellow.
Do you have those over there in Austria? The pastels?
Not really so much, a bit, but not like we do. We do have the bunnies, though. The bunnies are everywhere.
Yeah.
And but they have the Ostenfire, which is you know, when we do the Holy Saturday fire, a lot of places will burn big bonfires on Holy Saturday night. Now they have a lot of other Easter customs. The eggs are big. And of course, the Austrians love sweets, so Easter candy is a big thing. Thing too is they have a wonderful tradition, which the French also do, and that is they tell the kids that, you know how in the Mass of Maundy Thursday, you come to a certain point and then the bells stop and you have the clacker.
Yeah.
Well, you probably wonder what happens to the bells. And the answer is they all fly to Rome to report to the Pope.
What?
Yes. And that's why the bells aren't there the rest of Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and they come back for the vigil. But when they come back, they bring candy for the children. And so what will happen is when the little ones are looking aghast and agawk at the altar being uncovered and everything that's going on, then they'll look down to their side and they'll see there's candy there that it wasn't there a minute ago.
Okay.
And the parents tell their children that the bells have brought it back from Rome.
The bells. The bells.
The bells, not the little bells, the big bells of the bell. They also stop.
Well, okay.
And
is this an Austrian thing? Is this an Austrian?
It's Austrian. It's French. It's in other places too.
Huh.
And so the little children, as I said, they've got to imagine the scene. It's the Holy Saturday Vigil, and they're doing the Gloria, and that means uncovering the altar, and it's, all the light. So the child's attention is completely focused on that altar.
Yeah.
So he doesn't notice the bell dropping the candy next to him.
I see. Okay. Well, that's.
Do you understand now?
That's a nice little. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little.
Okay. Any closing remarks for this episode, Charles?
Yeah, this has been a long episode.
I didn't think it'd be long. I just got 8 questions, but we really yeah.
We were just going on in our own stuff. I think part of the problem is that the world is getting so crazy that the worlds we imagine are much more enjoyable.
That's true.
But, ladies and gentlemen, I do have a message for you. And several things have occurred in the Twittersphere, as we call Twitter, the realm of Twitter, the Twittersphere, the realm of the twits, of which I'm one. I'm not pointing fingers. The blogosphere, Facebook, all social media. The level of sheer nastiness and vitriol gets ever deeper and greater and nastier and harsher. Well, there are times to be harsh, ladies and gentlemen. There are times to be nasty when you really have to defend truth. But look at so much of what appears. It's not really about truth. It's about vindictiveness. It's about feeling good about oneself. You know what? Don't do that, because it's not satisfying. We've been given so many wonderful helps to heaven, so many great graces, regardless of the problems going on. Especially this time of year, when the sacrifices our Savior made for us, which is so much more than anything any of us have done for the cause, except maybe some of our Chinese and Nigerian and Indian brethren. Let's relax, huh? Let's stay sane. Let's go through Holy Week. Let's enjoy Easter. Let's have a look around at what there is to be grateful for, what there is to thank God for. And our friends, our family, whatever liturgies we may be able to get to, for everything that's good in our lives, let's be thankful. And for the failings of others, the sins of others, let's look to our own before we look to theirs. I hate to get all Pollyannish. I don't want to sound like but
you don't want to sound like the what?
The Easter Bunny. I don't want to sound like the Easter Bunny, although that may be misleading. A composer friend of my parents made up a song for my brother and me, which had the useful phrase in it, "Don't throw rocks at the rabbit, or he'll bring rotten eggs home." But be kind, ladies and gentlemen. Be happy. Christ is about to be crucified, and then he shall have risen. And that is where it's at, ladies and gentlemen. Our questioner who asked about the metaphysics of space, yeah. Think about the faith. Think about applying the faith to things you've never applied it before. whether it be cooking meals or great literature or walks in the park. What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, stay sane inside insanity. Don't go crazy. Don't get nasty. Don't get upset. Just chill. Remember that however upset you get, nobody cares. You're only going to hurt yourself. You're not going to hurt anyone else. You know, if I say, I don't recognize the Archbishop of Pittsburgh, and I get myself worked up. By the way, I have nothing against the Archbishop of Pittsburgh. I don't know anything about the current Archbishop.
Always going on Pittsburgh. Even the Archbishop can't escape your wrath.
Well, there's that. But I don't know anything about him. So for all I know, he's a saint. I have absolutely no idea. I'm just pulling Pittsburgh out of a hat, as I always do. Thanks for pointing that out.
Not much of a hat. There's one card in the hat, and it's Pittsburgh.
Well, poor old Pittsburgh. Well, and I like Pittsburgh. That's the worst of it. I've been to Pittsburgh. It's a nice place. And at any rate, I could be as wound up and annoyed. Well, my own Cardinal Mahoney. I could be as wound up and annoyed at Cardinal Mahoney as I want to be. Or, better yet, Uncle Ted McCarrick. It didn't get to do him any bad. I could be as it's not going to do anything. I could pray for him. I could pray for his victim. Because, nothing would please Satan more than to have a cardinal frying forever. I'm sure he's enjoying the ones he has. So, pray very hard for Cardinal McCarrick and for his victims. And for everyone. For us. For you, Vinny. For me. For everyone you know. Pray, 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 ladies and gentlemen. We all need it. And may we all meet merrily in paradise. Because after what this world has been, now, as my late father used to say, if we go to hell, this is as close to heaven as we're ever going to get. But if we make it to heaven, this is as close to hell as we'll ever have been. And I don't want to get any closer to this. So, let me wish you a very happy Easter.
Okay. That'll do it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time.
God bless. Bye-bye.